Hey, how you doing?
Good, man. How are you?
Good. Welcome to the platform.
Thanks.
Man,
Heard great things.
I think this is 16. 15 or 16.
Am I too far?
No, you're good. I don't want to get any closer. Um, cool. So, let's get into some stuff.
Yeah. Let's get
Um,
knee deep, as they say.
yeah. Let's get knee deep. Check. So, uh, life's fantastic. Because we have it, and we can either make it really crappy, or we can make it really fun.
Mm-hmm.
And by fun, I mean everything that's not misery and terrible. We have that capacity in us. With the things that we are limited, the things that we have to obey, natural law, and things that we can't fight, once we get those taken care of, we can be good. Once we submit, because I think what really messes us up is trying to fight that which we cannot overcome.
Mm-hmm.
And so yeah. How's everything with you? I mean, I don't just mean like, hey, how's your life going? Because we're beyond that now. We've already done the whole subconscious jargon.
Yeah.
We already know that we just have to just be what it is that we want to be. And by that I mean how we want to exist on earth with these little lives. So we got it, right? It's like, hey man, you live the first few years of your life and you go, I don't really like what's going on. And then you learn some things. You learn some truths, some laws, and we're on that path. But it's like, look, I think in order to conquer that whole thinking, you just have to take yourself out of the perspective that you're striving for something. It's like it's already there. And I'm speaking in terms of like trying to change yourself.
Yeah.
And of course that doesn't mean to completely forget about or to conduct our way as if the past isn't true. Whatever that past is for anybody. You know, it's like I look back on the history of my life and say, I don't like the way things work out. I don't like the way I was, and I just mean on certain things, not everything, obviously, not everything. At least in my case, but you better yourself, and so, so that's that, and so, yeah. What's going on in your noggin?
Well, I mean, since the last time we talked, things have been going really well. Um, it's it's strange to think that everything that we want and desire is already there. It can already be, and we hinder ourselves from getting it. And then once we learn how to get out of the way, of ourselves, these things can come naturally to us. And it goes back to everything that we said, like these invisible laws. I think it pertains most to the law of attraction, and I think that law, however it's manifested in life, like real life, whether it has a different name, law of attraction, whatever. That I think is one of the biggest laws to try to master or overcome. And even over here, even on my way over here, I was reminded of that in two ways. One, a cop was behind me when I was pulling off the freeway, and I didn't even think anything of it. And then I remembered a time, and then other times, like I used to drive so afraid of police being behind me because I was like, oh my gosh, if they're on their plates, like, do I have, maybe I'm not driving with insurance right now, or, in California, my tags were expired, and at one point my license was suspended, and I always had like this fear of the cops. Like I would be that guy that if I saw a cop, I'd be like turning into the gas station, And I remember one time in LA, it was almost literally the last time I was going to drive my truck in LA. I was driving it over to a friend's house to park it, and then the next time I was going to drive it was going to be back to Ohio. And I was like, oh man, I don't get pulled over. It was like from Studio City to Burbank. It was not that far of a drive. And sure enough, man, I mean, I was worried about it. Like it was a real fear. I was like looking out, and like this cop beelined to me out of nowhere. I mean, it was so strange. I mean, I remember this vividly. I saw the cop, and he was like way behind me, and I was like, okay, I don't think you can see my plates. And I was so nervous. I was like, as soon as I can, I'm going to turn right. And we were at a stoplight, and then next thing I know, he was on me, and I was pulled over. And I thought about that, with everything that we're learning and how, like, people sense things, and they don't understand why, like intuition or just vibes. They're like, man, I don't know. There's something wrong with that truck. Let me go check it out, And it's like, yeah, I was sending out a signal saying, like, hey, pull me over, because I was so afraid of getting pulled over that I attracted it. And so I was thinking about that. I was like, man, this cop probably isn't even, he was right behind me. I was like, he probably isn't even running my plates or anything right now because, A, I'm completely legal, and B, I just have no fear at all, no anxiety. And then I thought, man, that's exactly how my life is playing out right now with success. Like business is coming and finding me now, like the next job and job offers and, people that want to give me money to work. They're knocking down my door again. And it's crazy because what was it? Just a month ago, I was nervous about where my next paycheck was going to come from. And, going through this and really focusing. And what's funny is now that you have it, you don't have to do anything. It's like it's on cruise control, and it's going to build itself and get bigger and bigger and bigger. And I thought about that again today. Earlier, I was like, you know what? Like my time is valuable, and so is everybody's. And not only is it valuable, but we can assign a value to it. So if I want to, I can say, hey, if you want me to be in your presence doing so and so and so, I am worth this much an hour, And up until, relatively soon, like let's just say the last 3 months or so, even less, I never really valued myself that highly. I always tried to, have that mindset when I gave bids and stuff. But I always, caved, and if I charged, if I did a bid and I was like, okay, we're going to be on this job for 80 hours and I'm going to charge $75 an hour. And then I write the number out and I get the materials and everything and I look at the total number and I'm like, oh, there's no way they're going to go for that. That's too high of a number for this job. And I would always doubt myself. And now it's the opposite. It's like, man, I am very skilled at what I do and efficient with it. And my time is worth money if I'm going to be working on a house or whatever. And so now I can assign a value to it and be confident in that. And then what's crazy is that gets portrayed to the homeowner whether they know it or not, because it's an invisible, sense of confidence. And I can give them a bid and say, hey, this is this much money. I just gave a guy a $13,000 bid to do a week's worth of work, and materials are not astronomical. I mean, they're relatively cheap, and and I didn't bat an eye, and he wrote me a check the next day. So it's been good. I mean, I think that applies to what you're saying about, like, okay, we figured out what we need to change or what we need to work on, and now do it. And now that we've been doing it, it's just done.
Right. Yeah. I thought about the idea of, you said like a few months ago or 3 months ago that you kind of, when things aren't flowing in like that, you get in a state of not you, but generally you kind of get in a state of worry, because you're not certain, you're not and you're not secure, and I was thinking about that, how you can train anything. You can train muscles in the body. You keep working them out, they adapt and they get stronger, and the flip side is, if you don't train something, it gets worse. So we are pretty good at training we train ourselves quite often on how to be in fear, and that is a subconscious thing too. We don't consciously say, I'm going to practice fear so I'm good at it. It's just everywhere around us, and it's just like a subliminal program that eventually gets downloaded into our subconscious. So the idea of panic and fear, you have to associate it or attribute it to something, like, I am going to be in panic when I don't have or do this and this and this. And so we get pretty good at having that skill of panic. So when something isn't flowing in, we forget. It's like we forget, even though we know. How funny is it that every time in the winter the news comes on and they talk about a snowstorm as if it's Armageddon, and it blows up everywhere, and then you think back, man, there's been so many snowstorms. Why do we treat it like it's such a big deal? Mm-hmm. And think about how we make mountains out of molehills with all kinds of things, not just the weather, but all kinds of things. Yep. Especially like death or some kind of like chaos. Hey, there's another war going on. It's like, man, when wasn't there a war? Yeah. When wasn't there some kind of like tyrannical or some tyrant, some country somewhere that most people don't even know where it is on the map, that's creating all kinds of horror? And it's like, yeah, we understand that's a bad thing, but again, what are you doing to help it, first off, if you are doing anything? Secondly, what's the big deal? It happens all the time. So what's good is, like, and I might have mentioned this in one of our platforms, but imagine being the first person on Earth. You appear, and you have no knowledge of the world, and there's nobody there to teach you about it. There's nobody there to comfort you and say, hey, it's gonna be all right. You're not a baby. You're just there. Let's just assume you're an adult, and you're like, okay, what's this chaos I'm living in? What is this place? And so you're running around, or you're hiding in a corner, and you're just kind of still, and then it's like the night comes, and you go, what's this? Like, what is this all about? What's going to happen? You make it through the night, and then the day comes, and then another night comes, another day comes. So what I'm trying to get at is patterns. We eventually just pick up on patterns. Mm-hmm. And then once patterns soothes us, that's why we love routines. That's why we love a schedule. Yeah. It's soothing to know, like, or to have that, I really wouldn't call that faith, but just kind of like know that something's going to repeat. You don't have to be worried about it not repeating. So,
familiarity as well.
Yeah. And I think that's very powerful when you can put your trust in things that even when things do seem to go against pattern, like when there's an earthquake or something. Well, we know earthquakes, they come all the time.
Yep.
But it's like there's this one eternal pattern that we know exists, that we don't have to be fearful no matter what happens. Because what's the worst that can happen? Death, right? Yeah. So I think that's a skill, because you have to focus on that.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, part of the problem is you can't help when you get emotional or, in a negative way. Like, you can't help it from coming on. But then
you can't help the situation, or you can't manage the
when it first happens. Like,
give me an example.
So, somebody cuts you off on the freeway and you get upset naturally. You can't help, you can't stop that if that's your natural reaction. But then once it happens, immediately you can then acknowledge it and say, no, I don't want to have that reaction. And then eventually you keep doing that long enough and somebody cuts you off and it doesn't even affect you. But you couldn't help that not affecting you. That was your natural, now that's your natural reaction to that, right? So a family member dies and you get sad, right? Like, you can't at first, that's your natural reaction, right? And so that stinks, because depression and anxiety, fear, all the things that would be considered negative emotions or negative feelings, they are triggered without our consent. And then we have to then be vigilant with changing those triggers or how we react to those things. And and what you're saying is the things that happen more often that you want to change, then we can be aware of them more often. But if something blindsides you, that you haven't felt in a while, because how often do family members die, or how often do you lose someone suddenly, unexpectedly? And so how do you train for that? How do you train to conquer the negative side effects of those emotions if you don't practice them? Because what you're talking about takes practice and skill, and then it becomes natural. And that's where, we are at in a lot of areas in our life. There are a lot of areas in my life where I'm still not happy with. I want to see some change in those areas. But if, what you said from the beginning is, man, I'm not going to have any anxiety or depression or fear, because I'll just give an example. This is not one, but let's just say I battle drinking alcohol and borderline alcoholic, and I'm let's just say, and again, I'm using this as an example because it doesn't, I don't have to battle with this one, but let's just say if something really bad happens in the day, I turn to alcohol. Right. And I don't like that. And nothing bad happens when I'm drinking. Let's just say, it's something that I don't like that happens. I wake up less energetic, and I spend money on it, and I just don't like the things that are associated with it, and so I don't want to do it. If I keep beating myself up every time that I do it, it compounds the issue, and then I'll do it more. But what I hear you saying, or at least what I'm adopted, is, man, just let it be, believe that it can be conquered, and do it. Every time it happens that you do conquer it, acknowledge it, be grateful for it, and celebrate it. And then every time you fail at it and you give into it, acknowledge it and let it go. Yeah. Just let it go, because we carry that proverb, about the two monks. Are you still carrying that woman? We carry this guilt and failure with us for not succeeding in areas where we want to be successful. Right, And it only does harm to us. And maybe I'm not talking to everybody. I don't know. Maybe there are some personalities where that guilt or whatever, maybe they get so vigilant at it and they're like, I'm never going to do that again. But for me, like, it just weighs me down when I'm, when I feel guilty for something that I've done. Like for me, one of my things is spending money recklessly, or like impulsively, So yeah, like, and it happens. So I'll just give you a real practical example. Like, I was having a really long day, probably 2 days ago. I have a lot of things that I have to accomplish in a certain amount of time, and my employee has a couple of days off that he has to take off, and it's throwing a wrench in some things and some deadlines, and literally I had to be 3 places at the same time, which is impossible. You can't even be 2 places at one time. And so I'm like, how am I going to do this? I'm juggling. I'm like, I want to satisfy each customer and give them, the time of day. I can't be at all these places at the same time, and they all want me there in the morning, and this and that. And so I was, stressed, and I was like, well, there's, I worked through it or whatever, and I was walking through Home Depot, and I literally said to myself, like, oh, I should go look at tools. Like, I could buy a tool, and, that'll give me, like, joy, because I love buying new tools. And I didn't buy anything. I didn't even look at the new toys. Yeah. I was like, no, man. I was like, this is exactly what I don't want to do when I'm in this situation. And I was able to overcome it. Yeah. And then a couple other things just like that have happened, and I'm seeing the change. Like, I'm seeing real change, and my bank account is growing, and money's coming out of nowhere. Like, people are giving me money, and I'm like, okay, everything that we're talking about is starting to manifest, and it's like, wow, stuff really works. But at the same time, the whole point in saying that was, when I do fail, if I do find myself, even like 3 days ago, or maybe yesterday, or 1 or 2 days ago, I went to Easton to buy a cigar, and I was like, you know what? I'm gonna go get some cologne, because I have like 5 colognes, but I'm out of one of my favorites, and I was like, I'm gonna go get some cologne and treat myself, like I got money, and like I want to, I like that cologne or whatever, and I was like, I don't need it. And I went to 3 different places, and nobody had it, but I found other colognes that I really liked, and then I looked online, and I could buy it, and I could have gone on Amazon and overnighted that cologne, and it would have been like $25 cheaper than those stores would have sold it to me, and I just didn't do it. I just talked myself out of it, and I was like, this is crazy. Yeah. Like, this isn't me,
Yeah, so that's so cool, because that is the evidence of the how subconscious programming works on a neurological level, because you focus on the triggers. It's like you mentioned the spending. Well, you know how there's people out there, and everybody does it, where you feel like buying something and acquiring something fulfills some kind of thing in you, and it's just neurological, because it's like the whatever happens chemically, the idea of acquiring something, it's like you've achieved something, which is always a good feeling, especially when you're like trying to achieve a goal. Let's just make it as simple, like when you're playing a video game or something, and you're trying to beat this thing, and then you get it, you achieve it, and then you've acquired something, and it's a chemical reaction or release, and that's cool, man. That what you just said is, when you no longer feel that, hey, if I acquire this, I'll feel that feel-good feeling. When that's non-existent, then that is subconscious programming showing the effect, the evidence.
Listen, people aren't going to understand how profound this is, except for maybe my ex-wife, because she knows like how impulsive I am. But I was walking in Nordstrom to get into the cologne section, and I saw this bathing suit that was like by far a must-have bathing suit.
2-piece.
No, it was a single. It was a onesie. Dude, it was hot pink, and it was short. I was like, dude, it just spoke to me. Like on the rack of bathing suits, that one jumped out, and I was like, oh my gosh. And so I went and looked for a small, and they had it. It was $40, and I was like, dude, this is sweet. I grabbed it, and I was like, awesome. I started walking. I got 5 steps. I turned around and I put it back. Yep. I was like, I'm not getting this. I'm like, $40. I'm like, it's $40. I'm like, I put it right back. And then it's funny because what you just said, it was almost as if, like, I wonder if people can buy things and fulfill it and then just return it and still be satisfied. Oh, yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. Because it was almost like just having it and thinking of that I had it was enough gratification right then and there. Yeah. And then I was like, okay, because I did possess it because I was like, it's good as bought. I have the money. I'm gonna walk up and get it. Right. And then 5 steps later, I'm like, no. I literally just went right back, and it's so funny because these 2 guys were at the counter, and I just walked right by them, and I was like, I wonder what they thought. They were like, oh, sweet as hell. What? Wait, what did that guy just? Why did he just put that back? Like, it was so random.
That's interesting, man. The whole concept of being able to have that discipline. That's a good tactic. Go in there, hold it, walk around the store and say, hey, this is in my possession now. Look how it just doesn't really matter. That feeling of that like achievement feeling is very momentary. So you get it. I mean, yeah, you don't have it, but at the end of the day, you realize, okay, I don't really need it. It's just an impulse thing. Unless it's something that you truly need that, whatever. But so yeah, that's very interesting. And so, while you're saying, I was thinking, when you're out there in the world looking around, and then you think of things that you don't have and want. It's kind of constant. It's like always battling us. I don't have that. I want that. I don't have that. I want that. But the whole subconscious thing is you force yourself to say, well, everything I want, I already have. Things like that. So you never really develop those like triggers that are waiting just to be, or that neurons set up to where you're just waiting for something to be triggered. Some people who are have set themselves up in a way that they're very easily irritated, and they're just waiting for somebody to say the wrong thing so they can just blow up at them. So it's like they're constantly rehearsing the narrative, and they rehearse it so much it becomes subconscious, and then they're out in the public, somebody does something, and they snap and they flip out, and they got the reward. Like, that's what they were searching for.
Well, and I think that speaks volumes to what I was talking about many episodes ago, where this idea of you get what you expect. To some degree, there's some truth in that. Like if you expect, your kids to lie, like you they did something, and you're going to ask them, and then you expect them to lie, like you're going to get the result that you're expecting. And maybe not always, I'm not sure how that works in, day-to-day life, but in the scenario that you gave, you're looking for that, and you're going to find it. As opposed to if you are like, I walk around looking for positive things, right? Naturally, that's just how I'm wired. Like I'm an optimist. Like I look at like, okay, what's the good that could come out of this bad situation? And so if that's how you operate, you're going to find the good. You will always find the good in those things.
That's like, so there's law of attraction, which, that's just that general term to describe much more that's going on, but law of attraction, but then it's awareness. It's being aware of of what else is out there as far as on a setting your mind up neurologically. So awareness, and Lipton talks about that. Expand your awareness, and so that's really good. What else? Where can that lead to? Because we got subconscious programming thing. We got the awareness, or we got the law of attraction. Earlier we were talking about the whole how things ebb and flow. It's like if you're somebody who lacks finances and always wants finances and always feels that you are lacking finances, then that'll always be a problem, because that's your awareness, that's what you're focusing on, and that's where you're structuring your neurological framework, is to be always in that state of lack. And then let's just say money starts flowing to your account every single day. Let's just say every day at noon, $50,000 gets put into your bank account. Finances, money. And so at first you go berserk. think about how interesting this would be. Imagine right now if everybody at noon tomorrow started receiving $50,000 in their account consecutively for however long. Think about what the broke person would do. Think about what the wealthy person would do. Couldn't you just assume that after a certain period of time, all wealth would return to those who already have it, and then everybody who doesn't would just be broke again? Yeah. And so it's not finances. It doesn't matter. You can give somebody broke $1 billion, and it'll be gone or squandered in just a matter of time, because they're just not wired for finances and what that world even means. Like, what is money? Like, what even is it? What does it represent? And I'm
guilty of that very thing. Yeah. But yeah.
I mean, gosh, of course. Like, I'm much better at it now. But man, that's the worst way to live as far as financially speaking, is just to constantly be searching for when the next money's going to come in to pay something off or to buy something. To always be in that state of lack. And it's now that I know, it's never what is physically in your bank, it's what's happening here. Yeah. And then it's just so much. It's like, you can educate yourself on, well, financial management. What about investing? What about how do I multiply my money? And where does money? What does it even mean? And look, here's the thing, man. I love. There's this guy that I like. His name's Grant Cardone. Some people hate him, but I like him for my own reasons. And so he's great because, and this is what a lot of financial advisors say, and people who talk about like wealth generation and whatnot, they say, first off, you have to want it. That's the thing. It's like people kind of have, I mean, not most people, right? There are some people out there, I don't know how many, but their general outlook on finances is negative. It's like, if you have it, then you must be a crook, or it's just unattainable. Or you never really tell yourself, like, hey, you know what? Why don't I just seek wealth? Not in any kind of horrible way or any kind of like evil way, but what's wrong with it? If you start looking into it, it's like, well, how do you acquire wealth? Well, like, you and your business, what are you going to go do? Rob banks or murder somebody? No, you're probably just going to go do more work, like give somebody of something of value and multiply it. And then it's really very basic math. It's really logical. So yeah, I mean, that all just ties into feeling and feeling lack and wanting, or believing that you already have. Like, man, if you believe, if you carry yourself throughout the day as if somebody who is already in possession of all the things you want, then you believe it enough, you'll become that. And then like, look, it's already evident, and you just said it in the past few weeks or months, it's like money's coming at you at all directions, and it's like, well, that's just who you are now. You're a money magnet. So accept it, believe it, and that'll be forever your reality. And now we can focus on other things, and that just goes towards everything, though. It's like health. What if somebody is 200 pounds overweight and they're just like, gosh, like I'm fat and I'm unhealthy and working out is such a pain and da-da-da. But flip that switch. Just start thinking you already are. And I know that may seem very simplified, but I mean, that's really the truth. Yeah. You got to just believe it. So yeah, to
piggyback off that, like the counter, sorry, the counter to that is that when you don't succeed in that thought, don't beat yourself up.
Right.
Just let it go, and then go back to feeling and believing it.
Yeah. Yeah. Because the beautiful thing is that it's a process. So when you want to when you want to go from A to B, when you want that change, it's a process. Yep. It's not from one day for 1 second to the next is done. Yeah. And there's a whole reason why that beautiful law exists. There's a reason for it all. And so yeah. God is the only true constant. I just wrote these down the other day. I'm not even sure what it says. God is the only true constant. Nothing else is. The universe is mental. The universe is spirit. Some things may appear to be constant, like math, but does math exist without a conscious observer? We can only have faith in constants. We shall only put our faith in the eternal. We shall only put our faith in the most eternal, in the one eternal. Play in the world, but only so long as your faith is on the one eternal. See, I think that's interesting because I just wrote these notes myself. Play in the world, but only so long as your faith is on the one eternal. This just ties into the whole baby in the sandbox, child in the sandbox effect, where if you're as a child, you can play in a sandbox and have all the fun. You can be focused on little toys and games and your little sand bucket, but as so long as mom's there watching or dad's there watching. So you kind of have that deeply rooted knowing. You don't even have to be conscious of it. You don't have to just well, kids do that. They look back and they say, hey, where's mom? Yeah. And if they look back and mom's not there, it's like, oh crap, like this doesn't matter anymore. Like where's that one person or dad? Yeah, that's right. Where's that figure that is everything to me, that I pin my whole existence on, because without them I'm done. And so I feel like without knowing that once we grow out of that childlike phase, then we have to eventually focus that towards something. And if we don't know what to focus that on, if we don't know that one eternal, we focus it on worldly things or patterns or our identities. We wrap ourselves up in our beliefs, our ideologies, our labels, what we think we are. It's like that saying a long time ago, we mentioned it. It's not, I am not what I think I am. I'm not what you think I am. I am what you think I think I am. Mm-hmm. Which that is existing through it is an absolutely exhausting way to live life when you're constantly hyper aware of how others perceive you. How you think others perceive you. Because like the spotlight effect, man, when you're walking through the store and you drop something and you're like, oh my gosh, I look so stupid, I feel like an idiot, I'm not even gonna pick this up right now because I don't want nobody to see my mistake. And then you look around, you say, oh my gosh, there's actually nobody in the room. Yeah. And that's like that, how we can do that. You know?
I think the better way, or not the better way, a great way to understand what you just said with the spotlight effect, dropping something in the store, is just next time you see somebody, like, this is my challenge. Next time you see somebody that looks embarrassed, recognize how you feel and how you don't care.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, totally.
You know what I mean? Like, if somebody like drops their, like for example, I don't know where I adopted this principle because it's somewhat of a common thing, but when somebody drops something at a restaurant or a bar, I clap.
Yeah, to get the energy. To mute that energy of people being like,
Yeah.
Oh man.
Yeah,
That looks like an idiot, or I feel like an idiot.
Exactly.
Yeah, I feel like an idiot for the guy.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
it's just this idea of like nobody cares,
Nobody cares,
as much as, and there are critical people,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
mostly like and hopefully we don't do this, but if anything we're embarrassed for them because we're like, oh, I've been there,
Right.
and they think I'm not.
Yeah.
And it's like, no, just like really recognize when we see it all the time, and we probably don't even recognize we see it. But man, next time somebody does something that looks like they're embarrassed about, recognize how you feel, and then when you do it next time, man, just move on accordingly. Like
Yeah.
it's
Right. Yeah.
it's not a big deal.
Yeah. Yeah. So empathy, being very empathetic is one of our most beautiful qualities as human beings, to be very aware of other people's emotions and to be very sensitive to it. And one quick thing I was going to say is the person who sees somebody drop something and then they're hypercritical of them, then all that reminds me of is the saying in scripture where it's judge not for, or do not judge, because the same measures that you use to judge will be judged against you. The person who is hypercritical of that person who drops something, they're hypercritical of themselves, because you don't have the capacity to be hypercritical unless if you practice it. And who do we practice it on most is ourselves. Yeah. So when we're super hyper aware of other people's observing us, then that person is going to be the most sensitive to being aware. See, that's aware. That's where awareness comes into play. It's like I'm super aware of that happening to that person, because it's like everybody's on pins and needles when they're in public, especially because they're super hyper aware of everybody's consciousness and where they're focusing their attention. Yeah. And it's like, dude, you nailed it. It's like that feeling, gosh, it's so vivid, because it happens to me all the time where you realize how much nobody cares. And so to be like, dude, I might look like this or be doing this, but man, nobody cares. It's a fleeting feeling too, because if you find yourself caring, if you're any kind of normal person, it lasts so little. It's just so, like when somebody breaks the glass at the restaurant, you notice it because it's a loud thing, and then you think, oh, I wonder what happened, and I hope it's probably not the big deal, and then you just go right back in your conversation. You're eating your food. It just doesn't matter.
Well, one thing I was going to say, I think it is in context is with this idea of like celebrities or people in real spotlights, and when you were telling me,
like cheap celebrities or like
no, like I'll tell you,
prominent figures who
I'll tell you, I'll just give you some examples. When you were telling that story, I thought of two people in particular, and one type of person. Paris Hilton had a sex tape, like
I thought you said like prominent important figures.
That's low.
But you mean like Paris Hilton types. You don't mean like Gandhi, who...
No. Yeah, so Paris Hilton had that sex tape, and it was like, man, I just imagine how she felt, right? Like the whole world was watching her. And then Tiger Woods was another one that just jumped out to me, like, cheated on his wife and whatever, and was like top golfer or whatever. And then you think about all the sex scandals in politics. Okay, so you think about all those situations, and now look at those people, and it's like as if it never happened, And so it just helps me gain perspective on how this too will pass, But I mean, those are grandiose, embarrassing things, right? Like, man, I have no idea. I mean, we're talking about dropping something at the store. I have no idea what it would be like to have a sex tape on the internet, or for everybody in the country to know that I cheated on my wife and that I'm a piece of shit. Like, man, how would you feel for that? But then to realize that, like, oh my gosh, it's over. Now nobody cares. And so, okay, dial that down to, you drop the bread in aisle 4. It's like, pick it up and keep going, man. Nobody.
So how powerful is that scripture when they brought the adulterous woman to Christ, and he says, they're like, this woman has committed adultery. Like Moses in the law commanded us that such should be stoned. What sayest thou? And he says, he is without sin. Let him cast the first stone. And the best part is when he leans down, they all walk away, and it's just him and her. And he's like, women, where are those thine accusers? Has no man condemned thee? And she says, no man, Lord. And he says, well, neither do I condemn thee. Now go and sin no more. Mm-hmm. So, we talked about sin and the nature of sin, what it all means. It's a topic we could talk about forever. But that's the thing. It's like when you judge, if you find yourself judging somebody, let go of that thought. Just don't stay on that train of thought. And best yet, don't try to ever think it. And then, of course, don't do it toward yourself. Now here's the thing. So this is interesting because I can conduct my life in a way so that I'm constantly in judgment towards others, but I can completely forgive myself for it. If I could train myself to be that kind of schemy kind of person, like, hey, I can go out and do all kinds of, like, let's just say wrong, and forgive myself for it, because it's going to wash away eventually. But it doesn't, because if we persist that, then it eats at us, and that's what they call the world will say, like, your consciousness. It's like, okay, don't do bad, because and it does. Yeah. It's true. It's like, look, man, you might have murdered somebody in an alley where nobody saw. Mm-hmm. And you could tell yourself, you know what, nobody saw it, dude. It's like what is it, Crime and Punishment. Fyodor Dostoevsky wrote a book called Crime and Punishment, and man, it's a great book. I mean, I read it back in LA, and back when times were real good. and so reading Dostoevsky at that time, it's like, it doesn't help, but it did help. But it didn't help. Like, I'll read it again with a different perspective, and so that it doesn't just like take me to levels where I just don't ever want to go again psychologically. But real quick, it's just about the story of a guy who like lives in he's like I think he's like a student, and he's struggling for money, and this is like mid 1800s or late, I think it's like maybe 1860s, or gosh, I might be wrong. It's like mid to late 1800s, let's just say. Yeah, it's that time. The Brothers Karamazov. No, I'm sorry, Crime and Punishment. And so, I mean, don't quote me on the date, but anyway, it's about this guy who's struggling, and he goes to a pawn lady, and she lives in this, I think, in the same flat as he does, or maybe in the same town, and she's like a lender. She's like a pawn shop person. Now they'll take your money, and they'll hold onto your product or your thing, and then and lend you that money at interest. And so he ends up, it's a great book, because he gets so wrapped up in his head, like, okay, why is it okay for me to kill? He ends up saying to himself, I'm going to kill her and take all her money, because he finds out where she stashes all her cash. And he's going through this giant dilemma, like, okay, why shouldn't I do it? Okay, why should I do it? Do I have the right to do it? And he's like, well, wait a minute. This woman screws people over. She lends them money for interest, and then if they don't pay her back, she keeps the product. Like, she's a horrible person. I have every right. I'm above that. I should kill her, take her money, because I am a good person. And this is obviously written way better than I'm saying it, but way more interestingly. But and then he ends up killing her, and then some things go a little haywire, and then there's a whole bunch of stuff starts to happen. But the whole thing is like, this just like tugs away at him, and like tugs away at him, and tugs away at him. And if I can kill the story for you, he's like, without a doubt, yes. I think what happens, it's been a long time, I gotta reread it, but he gets to the point where he finds out that he's in the clear, I believe, and that like he's not going to be charged for this murder, even though there's like this detective that starts getting on him, and he starts freaking out. But at the end of the book, I believe, I'm 98% sure, he walks into the detective's office and just turns himself in, because he can't live with, a lack of better term, he cannot live with the guilt. He just can't do it. He's like, it eats away at me.
I think that's what the Bible is saying. I honestly don't remember the context. I literally have no idea when Jesus says the truth will set you free. But I've been really meditating on that lately.
Yeah, that's so good.
And I think that has a lot to do with it. Like, the truth will set you free, because when you tell the truth, and it's not about like the way I just said it. What I'm saying is not like if somebody asks you something and then you have an option to tell the truth or lie. I'm talking about once you've already lied or you do something that nobody knows about. That's when it eats away at you. And that's why the truth will set you free, because you're in bondage to that. You know, you're enslaved to that. And there's an interesting verse, and I don't know how this applies to the whole thing, but I think it's in line with what we're talking about. But there's this verse I wrestled with for many years now, and it's in James. I believe it's in James 5. And it says, do not sin. But if you do sin, we have an advocate with the Father. And it's confess your sin amongst your brothers, and you will be forgiven. And I've always wrestled with this idea of, okay, what's the difference between confessing my sin to someone here on earth or just to God? You know, like, I do stuff in secret that nobody knows about. Why do I have to go tell so-and-so when I can just say, God, man, I'm really sorry for doing that? And I just realized that, like, it's so powerful, but basically what you're doing is being phony. You're being a fake. You know, like when you're doing things that nobody is aware of, that you're doing, like if I had a drug addiction, cocaine, like if I was snorting cocaine all the time, you know, like that and I was hiding it from everybody, like that would eat away at me, man. Like I wouldn't be able, it'd be so hard to just bear with that in my conscience, you know, like you're saying, it would eat away. And so that is, in my opinion, like why we confess to our brothers, because it's like it sets you free. It allows you to be who you really are. And one of the things that I've learned going through that Next Level program, I think they call it emotional leadership training, or emotional leadership, something like that, is, and this is like really profound but super simple at the same time, is that everybody is broken and wearing a facade to some degree, you know, putting on their best face, and we make the most relationship connections when we're real. And those two things contradict each other. And so when two people meet and they're superficial, their relationship's going to only be so strong, you know, over so long. And in this training that you're there for 3 days, you develop some of the strongest relationships you'll ever develop. I mean, like really strong friendships. And the thing about it is everybody's real. I mean, there's no point in being fake at all in this you know, program.
Right.
It only hurts yourself.
Right.
You know, you could go in there and say whatever you wanted. I mean, you can confess what. I mean, these people are all saying the same things, you know, and sharing the same things, and it's crazy because, you know, I have a friend right now that I'm getting to know better, and we're talking about things, and she's sharing like some real, like, transparent, embarrassing things, you know, and our relationship, you know, it's like growing, but it's like that's where, like, being real is where it's at, and you realize that everybody. And then I shared something like, oh, you know, I was like, oh, I can relate because of this, and I shared a very similar situation as her. She was like, are you making that up to make me feel better? Like, no. I'm like, dude, we all are, you know, putting on this front of looking better than we.
Oh yeah, man, and we're so well trained at that too, because when we expose ourselves to the facade people present, and that's all we know. Like that is one of the key reasons why we as a society went through a big. I think we're coming out of it. I mean, it still exists, but at least, and it might just seem like that because in my own awareness, I'm pushing it away. So it's like it's funny how we assume that our problems is like the world's problems, where your circumstances is the world's circumstances, where it's like, no, it's not the case. Like there's a dynamic of circumstances going on, and yeah, there's like political things that we can all agree, that we're all going through, and there's some things that you can't argue, but yeah, the training, we're so well trained into just be like, with the social media, and then growing up with watching TV and watching movies and listening to stories, because when somebody tells a story, man, they're only giving you the highlight moments. It's like, especially when you're trying to entertain or be very persuasive and convincing, and it's like we're constantly being bombarded with these facades, and then you just get to know somebody, and like you and that girl, it's like, man, that's so cool, and that's really cool that you guys do that, and that center offers that to have that with total strangers, you know, because man, we walk around, we carry out, we have to be among so many strangers, and yet it's like, if you think about it, they're not so strange. They're not strangers. Everybody's got their thing going on, and it's just we have this thing that we have to present ourselves in. That's why older people are so cool, man, because they're just so like, dude, let it go, man. Like, this is how it is. We don't have to. I mean, yeah, you can be professional when it's time to be professional. You can have manners when it's time to have manners. But it's like, dude, be the best thing you can do as a human being is just be real.
Yeah. Yep. I mean, that's all I got as far as, you know, I'd like to wrap it up, but I will say, and I don't want to get on a tangent, but I think we probably got it right when we were kids and babies, and we get it right when we're like grandparents, and like everything in the middle is just one big F up, man. Yeah, you know, it's just like us screwing everything up, and then getting to a point where we realize, like, man, none of that mattered. And you know, we say that like we just made a funny joke about it, and it's interesting because that's what we really are just becoming aware of. Like right now, like this stage in our lives, like that's why I love doing this. And I'm not talking to the audience, but more so to you, is like, dude, we're becoming those old wise people now, because we're saying things that they're thinking and saying that they wish they would have done, and just, you know, not cared. And, you know, I just texted Cameron 2 nights ago. There's this church camp that the church is going to, and for high schoolers in Florida. And I don't know how long it is. It's probably like a week or something. And Kaylin's going. I mean, dude, everybody's different, but I just, like, I would have been on that in a heartbeat, you know. Florida, they're going to a beach, they're staying in a hotel, a bunch of high schoolers, you know. And I mean, even if you don't love Jesus, I mean, even if you don't care for Jesus, like, that's a fun trip. And so Cameron doesn't want to go for very personal reasons, and I respect those reasons. And a lot of people at the church want him to go because he's a super cool guy. So his reasons, although they're real, they're cosmetic, and they're superficial for the most part. You know, like when he's an adult, he's going to realize, like, man, I wish, like, he might say to himself, man, I wish I wouldn't have let those things affect me the way that they did. Because in hindsight, everybody goes through that, and it is what it is. It's not acne, but, you know, like, that's one thing. Like, if I had acne, you know, like, you might shut yourself in the house and not want to be seen. Like, Cameron doesn't have acne, and he's really good looking, but I'm just saying, like, to give, you know, to paint a picture. Yeah. And so his youth leader, or whatever they call him, the church staff member, reached out to me and was like, hey, man, you know, I really want to get Cameron to go. So I texted Cameron, and I was like, it just Like this just flowed out of me. And I believe this, and it's at the core of how I live my life, but I articulated it in a way that I was like, yeah, man, that's right. Like what I just said is the way I want to live my life. And I said, hey, Cameron, I just want you to know that you could go on this trip and have an absolutely great time. That's an absolute real possibility. You can't argue that. You could go and this trip could suck, could be miserable, and not like it at all. That's a real possibility. You can't argue that. One of those two things could happen. You could either love it or you could hate it, or it could be in between. But one of those outcomes is a real chance, a possibility. And I said, but you'll never know which one of those outcomes it will be unless you go. And I said here, this is the thing that is like profound to me, is I said, but here's the thing. Regret is twofold. I said you can regret the things that you did do that you wish you didn't, and you can regret not doing the things that you wish you did when you look back. And I said, I'm just telling you now, and I was like, I'm trying to instill some wisdom in you. I said, I would much rather live with the regrets of doing something that I wish I didn't than the regrets of not doing something that I wish I would have and not known how it would have turned out. Because that eats away at you. You know, like to do something and know for sure and certain beyond a shadow of a doubt how it played out and how it affected your life in a bad way is certainty, and you can deal with that. But man, to regret not going up and talking to that girl, or not taking that trip, or not saying yes to this, you never will ever know how that, and then that can eat you up.
Oh yeah, because you're so right, man. Because it's certainty versus a slew of different paths,
Whole different lives.
options. Yeah.
Change your life. So anyway, and I get that might not apply to every situation, right? Like I'm not saying like, oh, I haven't thought it through, but like, oh, what about murder? Like,
Yeah, well, of course, there's some like exceptions. Like
Yeah.
you don't want to become a yes man to everything. Like, hey man, here's some crack. Oh man, if I don't take this, I'll regret it. There's some things.
Try it once,
Exactly. Like the saying, you should try everything at least once. But
Yes, twice.
yeah, but see, and it's also one of the things I think too is if you don't do something, then you have a choice now. Either live in speculation or just forget it. Just forget it. And we can control what eats at us though if we just sit there and focus with regret, because regret's horrible.
It pertains to regret, because you don't regret what you forget.
So like, okay, here's an example. Let's just say I'm at somewhere and I see a beautiful woman. And I'm on vacation somewhere, and I'm in Italy, let's just say. I'm in Venice, and I'm sitting there at a cafe, and I see a beautiful girl, and I'm like, I should just go talk to her because I find her very attractive, and her energy and everything. I should go talk to her. But I'm not, because who knows, maybe she's got somebody, or she's going to think I'm stupid, or, I'm not even Italian. She probably just wants to tell, just the whole crap.
Yeah.
And you go home. And then you're sitting there going, man, and I've done that. I mean, I've been to Venice so many times where I'm at a cafe looking at it.
There's a man
And
on his Vespa.
and so he's got a two-seater. I'm just like,
He's wearing
man,
like bathing suits.
son of a, and he bought it. He walked out of the store with it.
Oh my
See,
God.
okay, but look, these are here. Okay, so let's just say the person goes up and says, "Oh, hey, what's going on? They want to hang out," and then they end up getting married, or they don't. It's just the night ends, and they realize they weren't for each other.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's that. Now here's the second part. You don't do it because, hey, you didn't do it.
Chicken down.
Now, think about how many times we do that. And this is what happened. This is what a midlife crisis is, I would say, at least for men, because I can't speak for women. But I would assume for women also, is there comes a point in your life where you start to become aware of your own mortality. And then you look back and say, oh my gosh, like there were so many things I didn't do. And then now here's the thing, and this is what's happening to somebody close to my family, the spiral downward of just constantly being in the state of regret, associating your identity with pain and suffering and lack and not going after opportunities, and you just become this wretched, empty individual with full of all just negative energy.
Yeah.
Regret and this and shortcomings and all that stuff, and that's just you now. It's like there's the danger is staying in that zone, staying in that place, because you can let regret become a giant mountain, or just say, hey, big deal, man, how about this, next time I see somebody where I get those same feelings, I'm gonna go talk to them.
Yep. Yeah.
So
You can overcome regret.
yeah,
Yeah, I agree with that, and let it go. But of the two regrets, yeah, that makes sense, because I was just saying that, like, you don't regret
the things that you do.
you don't regret things that you didn't do all the time, right? Like, there's tons of stuff that we don't do. So it only pertains to regrets, and then when you regret something, you either regret it because you did do it and you wish you didn't, or because you didn't and you wish you did. And of those two, one, you can work out the calculations and then move on. But both of them you can, right? Because, like, even the things like you're like, oh my gosh, if I would have done that, I could have been here. Or, like, for example, you had a chance to marry so and so, and you decided to marry this person instead, and now this person's a millionaire and has the lifestyle that you wanted, and you're like, man, where would my life have been if I would have followed that path?
Yeah, that's like the worst place to be in.
Yes, exactly. That's my point.
Yeah.
Well, both of them are bad anyway. To dwell in regret is bad anyway. But anyway, I like, my thing is within reason, right? Like, reasonable decisions. Don't regret not doing something. You know what I mean? Like, and I've talked about this too with my move to California. Like, somebody that I know has been talking about moving, and, like, they really want to move out of Ohio, like, really bad, and something just keeps holding them back.
Oh, I know you're talking about.
Yeah. And I'm like, dude, just do it, because 5 years.
Yes. And see, that's the person whose regret is going to eat away at them, because they're persistently thinking about the idea of moving day after day, and it's sitting on the back of their mind, That's when you should act on it, because look, no one's going to sit there and think, oh gosh, I really wish I could just snort some crack. Like, I got to snort some crack. Like, man, it's eating away at me day after day, month after month. And it's like, look, that really isn't the case, I would say, with most things, with most things that are negative, that are not healthy for you, good for you. But if it's like, hey, I'm moving out, I see so many benefits in it. It just looks so good. I envision it being a very good thing. I got to do it, but you don't do it, and then next thing you know, you're 50, completely miserable. What's the word? The word I'm looking for is you're very what's that word? We have a disdain for the world. Resentful. Yeah, you're very resentful towards yourself and the world, because you just didn't act on this big thing that you had your mind set up for so long. And a huge part of not going after things is because you think too long about the consequences of failure, or what would it be like to have to go through failure. Hey man, I want to start this business, and oh gosh, but man, if I start it and I fail, like, that's gonna suck. Well, dude, you're not giving yourself good options here. Like, you're not, like, give yourself some credit.
I know.
Do something, man.
What if you succeed?
Yeah, what if you succeed? And if you do fail, it's your choice if you want to dwell on that.
Yeah.
If you fail, find out why, or if you don't care enough, then just move on to the next thing. So
Fear is crippling, and that, I would say, that is a great concept to end with, or at least if we didn't say anything at all in this whole conversation to like say, man, live life without fear of regrets, because in the scenarios that we talked about, we don't do something because we're afraid of the how we look or how it's gonna end up, and then we don't do it and we never know how it would have ended up. And it's like, dude, just go talk to that girl, go talk to that guy, go move, go take that job, sell all your possessions and hike, the Himalayas. Just go and do it.
Yeah, because remember what we said before? Because at the end of the day, nobody cares. Nobody cares whether or not you're succeeding. You go on that trip, you go hike the Himalayas, you go live in a cave for 5 years. Nobody cares. You care, so take care of yourself.
Yeah. Yep. Mental health, man. Yeah. Mental health is number one. Yeah. Be whole.
Yeah, be whole. Be whole. Peace.